What is homeopathy helpful for? What is the first thing that comes to mind? For most people would be the winter flu or a sprain like ankle sprains, and of course for childhood conditions. Because it's non-toxic and very effective, many people use it for their kids, for example for teeth in pain or ear inflammations, etc. And this is great. But homeopathy is much more than that. Those are all acute conditions that homeopathy is very used for, but there is a very wide spectrum of chronic conditions where homeopathy can be very helpful. So in this video, we will discover the main 6 healing dimensions of homeopathy. Let's get right in. The first healing dimension of homeopathy is the physical level. So physical healing. As we have mentioned, it's very known for acute conditions, for example for children, for colics, fevers, ear infections, constipation, diarrhea, skin issues, teeth in pain, colds and coughs. And in a similar spectrum of acute conditions, it's also very effective for adults, of course. But there is also a really wide spectrum of chronic conditions that homeopathy is helpful with. Of course, this is not a thorough list. These are just some of the most common to get a general idea. For example, the digestive system, like bloating, constipation, digestive issues like diarrhea, irritable bowel syndrome, heartburn, gluten sensitivity, etc. Then we have the immune system. Some of them are like allergies, for a wide spectrum of allergies, whether it's hay fever or food allergies like to chocolate, strawberries, peanuts, or to dust. And it's also very effective for people that have multiple allergies, like 10 or 15 allergies, so they're hypersensitive. And then autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, etc. Reoccurring colds and cough, for example, if we are susceptible to catch colds frequently, which means that our immune system doesn't function in an optimal manner. And then we have the skin, acne, eczema, psoriasis, rosacea, various types of dermatitis. Then the endocrine system, all types of thyroid diseases, polycystic ovarian syndrome, a wide spectrum of menopausal symptoms. Also, wide spectrum of premenstrual symptoms, whether it's cramping pain, mood swings, etc., infertility. And then we have the nervous system, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and so forth, and pain management. And just let me stress this, in all these videos we are always referring to classical unicystic homeopathy. What this means in a very simplified manner, that's the style of homeopathy that is the most holistic and practically oriented. And it's based on all the principles in the traditional homeopathic literature. So even though we say pain management, of course it's obvious that we will be addressing the root cause as well and not doing a symptomatic approach. So in the pain management we have back pain, migraines, gout, arthritis, sciatica, etc. And of course, there are many more conditions on the physical level that homeopathy is helpful with, whether it's high blood pressure, low blood pressure, etc. These are just some of the most common. And as we have seen in the previous videos, many of the chronic physical conditions we have, they may have the root cause on the physical level, or as we have seen, many of them have the root cause on the emotional level. So let's see where homeopathy is helpful on the emotional level. Here we are in the second healing dimension, that is emotional balance. As we know, emotions are dynamic. They flow like water through our system. We may wake up in the morning very moody and anxious. For example, we have a presentation at work, so we are very tense and restless and anxious. Then the presentation goes very well and we are ecstatic, very happy. Then we drive home and in the traffic, somebody doesn't see our car and just cuts in front of us and we get super angry and we're all altered And then we come home and our partner prepared a great meal for us and we're really joyful and relaxed. So it's natural for our emotions to ebb and flow, like a flow of water. But there can be a lot of blockages or alterations of this flow that really disrupt our life quality. I will be covering them in a separate video because it's such a rich and interesting topic that can help us manage and understand our emotions better. Here, let's just dig right in what is homeopathy helpful with regarding our emotional imbalances. What it's most commonly used for is anxiety and depression, but of course there are many more emotional imbalances that can be addressed with homeopathy. For example, anger, fear, despair, guilt, shame, grief, panic attacks, severe jealousy, hopelessness, emotional exhaustion, emotional numbness, resentment, etc. So while many of these emotions, as we have just mentioned, are natural and a healthy response to life challenges, they can sometimes manifest in unhealthy or overwhelming ways, right? It's really healthy to be angry if somebody trespasses our property and starts to break our things, so we make clear boundaries. But if we are prone to anger and it's hard for us to control anger impulses, as we have seen in the previous videos, we are much more prone to develop heart disease, besides that our life quality is lower because we have anger management problems. And in this case, homeopathy can be very helpful with when it's imbalanced, as well as we suppress our anger, right? On the other side of the spectrum, also homeopathy can help us balance it. And the same for many other different emotions. So let's go to the third healing category, and that is the mental level. So the healing for mental clarity and balance. As we have mentioned on the emotional level, that our emotions are like water flowing through our system, our mind and our mental level, it's like a clear sky where a lot of different weather conditions can be going on. For example, if we are in a storm, we can have a lot of negative thinking, dark clouds, as we could say, rumination, catastrophizing, obsessive compulsive thinking, and so forth. On the other hand, we could have periods that our mind is really clear, our attention span is really good, and we can be easily focused and have very clear perception and, let's say, organized creative mind level or mind states. But if that's the case, that our mind is in balance, let's have a look where homeopathy can be helpful. So as we have mentioned, for negative thinking, self-criticism, when we're repeatedly very self-critical to ourselves, that we can literally destroy our self-confidence, etc., and dramatically lower our life quality, rumination, catastrophizing, impulsivity, when we have really difficulty to control our impulses, whether for eating or other behaviors, addictions, perfectionism, a lot of attention span disorders like ADHD, ADD, obsessive compulsive disorder, also very, very effective. Mental exhaustion, when, for example, we have been studying a lot or working a lot with our mind for our work, and even after resting and sleeping and taking a few days off, we still cannot regenerate. So it's very helpful for those conditions, for mind confusion, for poor memory, panic disorders, indecision, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, autism, and so forth. And let's go to the next healing dimension of homeopathy, the fourth one, and that is the energy level, or our energy and vitality. So what homeopathy can do for our energy restoration. Our energy and vitality are extremely important. If we have low energy or low vitality, basically all the other systems are affected. Our physical health decreases, our mood stability and balance decreases, our mental clarity, it's not there, and we can just be struggling to keep up doing basic things. And especially with the challenges of modern life, where many of us feel this consistent physical, emotional, or mental strain, which can easily lead to exhaustion and different type of imbalances. So in this type of situations, homeopathy can be extremely helpful to restore our vitality. And let's go to see the fifth healing dimension, which is trauma healing. Fortunately, trauma awareness is becoming every time more present, and more people are familiar with it. In simplified terms, what is trauma? Trauma is the disconnection from ourselves. Many of us, when we think of trauma, may think about soldiers in the war, or being brutalized as a kid, experiencing physical abuse, being bullied, or a car accident. And these are definitely are traumatic experiences, or can be traumatic experiences. It's not so much what happens to you externally, it's more about your internal reaction to it. So there are very different scenarios that can create trauma and long-lasting effects. Let me give you the example of Ethan. Ethan was a 6-year-old kid, very healthy, curious about the world, loving nature, his family, and he cried very rarely. And one day he was playing with the blocks and constructed a beautiful tower, and his brother passed by and crashed by mistake his tower. And of course he just burst into tears and ran to his father and said, Dad, he just broke my tower. And his dad barely looked up from the phone and said, come on, Ethan, are just some blocks. Don't make such a big deal from it. And he just wiped his tears and nodded and moved on because he didn't want to be a burden, right? And this type of scenes repeated pretty frequently throughout Ethan's childhood. For example, if he scraped his knee, his mom will say, and he will start to cry, his mom will say, stop crying, don't be so dramatic, that's nothing. Or if he will be nervous about something that is going on at school, his dad will be just tighten up, everything is okay. By the time Ethan was 12, he noticed that things inside him are shifting. For example, when he was sad, he will just hide it inside of him. When he will be hurt, he will just shrug it away. It's okay. Even when his best friend moved away, he was like, whatever, doesn't matter. So as an adult, Ethan was seen as a very dependable person, very calm, very stable, very reliable. And yet he noticed when he started to have intimate relationships that it's very difficult for him to connect emotionally and express his emotional needs. And actually, he noticed that it's really hard for him to feel his emotions because he was basically suppressing them all his life. So this was an example of how something traumatic, having emotionally unavailable parents, can let us develop a coping mechanism of suppressing our emotions. And Ethan had then a lot of problems in his adulthood because of this, because he just couldn't access his emotions anymore. So if you cannot connect with yourself and your emotions, other people also cannot do so, and it's very difficult to develop any type of partnership like this. So in this case, homeopathy is very helpful, not only to help with the emotional suppression, that it's the coping mechanism that Ethan acquired because of his trauma of not feeling heard, not feeling understood, not feeling loved and acknowledged, and not feeling that his feelings matter. So homeopathy addresses the root cause, and then as a consequence also the coping mechanism of suppressing your emotions. So what are the possible effects of trauma? Trauma can cause emotional and psychological distress in many different ways. That can lead to cognitive difficulties, lots of physical health issues and chronic diseases, behavior changes, long-term mental health challenges like anxiety, depression, PTSD, and a wide range of others. And as we have mentioned, how homeopathy can help us. Homeopathy helps us to address the root cause of trauma, not just the symptoms, so it can restore balance in the physical, emotional, and mental level where the trauma created an imbalance. which allows us to break free from this hindering pattern, which is limiting our well-being. Okay, so let's transition to the sixth, the last of the main healing dimensions of homeopathy, and that is intergenerational transfer or ancestral healing, the inherited patterns that we may have. This is perhaps one of the least discussed topics overall, and also in the self-development community, in the healing community, etc. So let me start straight off with an example. Mary is 12 years old. She lives in an average home, goes to school, never experienced any major trauma. And yet she notices every time there is an exam or somebody raises their voice, she feels her heart racing and starts to be very stressed and altered very quickly, even though she notices people around her don't seem to react at all. So she wonders, why is it so? But Mary doesn't know that her mom, Sarah, she grew up in a very different environment. Her household was much more chaotic because her father was an alcoholic. So there was like this ambience of fear, like a storm moving through the house. She was always on guard, like bracing where there will be the next outburst. And even after she left her home, this sense of fear stayed in her system. So if she would hear a loud noise, she will immediately go to the worst case scenario. And in generally stressful situations, she will just panic very easily. So what actually happened to Sarah, she being exposed in her childhood to this stressful environment, didn't just affect her emotionally, but did affect her biology as well. The fear and anxiety she lived with changed how her genes regulate stress, altering the way her body responds to danger. And without Mary even realizing it, those changes were passed down to her. And she inherited from her mom this tendency to feel easily altered when exposed to stress. And this is called, in scientific terms, epigenetic intergenerational transfer. That it's just what we have described. An increasing number of studies show that we can inherit these psychological predispositions, how we perceive specific things, which emotions we tend to feel, as much as we can inherit tendency for physical diseases. In science, this has been researched for the last couple of years or decades. But in homeopathy, this is taken very seriously, the intergenerational transfer. For over 250 years, we have a very well-developed structure of how to spot it in the organism, the categorization of different types and styles of intergenerational transfers, so we are able to address it. This was developed already 250 years ago, as mentioned, by the doctor and creator of homeopathy, Samuel Hahnemann, because he just noticed that sometimes you cannot generate an amelioration in the person. Something is blocking the healing process. And that was the intergenerational pattern that we call miasm. It's a very wide topic in homeopathy, so it's totally out of reach to be covered in such a short video. We have brushed through all the 6 healing dimensions of homeopathy, and as we have seen, it has a very wide spectrum of effectiveness. So whether it's acute conditions or chronic conditions on the physical, emotional, and mental level, etc., homeopathy helps us to address these issues from the inside out. Of course, we are always talking about classical unicistic homeopathy, so it has a very wide holistic framing and doesn't address only the symptoms, but looks behind the surface, searching for the root cause. And if you have been seeking for a deeper holistic healing system, maybe homeopathy is what you have been seeking for. So thanks for coming today with me on this journey. I hope that you learned something new. If you have any questions, you can send them to me. And until the next time, take care and stay curious.